So first of all, hello and welcome, and thanks to everybody for coming. Thanks to Bill for organizing this. In case anyone doesn't know me, my name is Asaf. I play woodwinds, and I've played with Bill a number of times, and I also do sound engineering. I studied sound engineering in college, and I've been doing it for a number of years. Basically, the idea behind this meeting or workshop is just to kind of go over some basics of sound engineering as much as we can. I don't know what background you're all coming from. I'm kind of going to start from the very beginning, but I am going to do my best to be very selective with what I get into and what I don't. I'm going to try to be very, very practical as far as what do we need to know in order to at least understand how this thing works. That means, for example, that I'm not going to really get into details about how do we connect every little thing. The reason for that is that every system is different, and there's no way that I can show you all of them. So I'm just going to do my best to make sure that everyone knows the basic terminology, what's a microphone, what's a mixer, we have volume, gain, things like that, simple terms, so that hopefully after this, you'll be able to at least get your bearings and at least, take a step in that direction. My recommendation is that if you are looking to buy a system, or if you have a system and you're looking to use it, my recommendation is to consult with a professional, at least in the beginning, to help decide which system to buy, and to get a good look at whatever system you have to see how to use that. How do I connect the one I have? Once someone shows you that, then you'll be able to figure out a lot of things on your own, at least find someone to help you out with the very first steps. In any case, I'm going to jump in, and I will stop here and there in order to allow people to ask questions. And generally speaking, you're welcome to raise your hands. There's a feature for that, or just raise your hand literally, and we'll stop. And if anybody needs any clarification. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to go here. Everybody see this? Basics of sound engineering, or it's working? Okay. So we're going to start with just how it's built. What are the basic components? The basic flow of a sound system. The idea behind a sound system, of course, is, we can't hear the singer, or the audience is too far away, or the singer isn't that loud, and we just need to hear better. That's all it's about. So we start with a singer, and the singer, when she sings, she creates sound waves, something we're probably all familiar with. In order to amplify, we need to turn those sound waves into electronic waves. We need to turn it into electricity. For that, we have a kind of an interpreter of sorts. We have a microphone. The microphone's job is to turn a sound wave into electricity. That's really just that's what microphones do. They turn sound waves into electronic waves. Once we turn it into electricity, we have the ability to send it into an amplifier. Once we amplify it, then we can send it to a speaker, and then everyone can hear much better. The speaker's job is to turn it back into a sound wave, because we turned it into electricity using the microphone, we amplified it, and the speaker turns it back into a sound wave so that everyone can hear. Once you pass a sound through an electronic system, you turn it into electricity and you turn it back, you are going to contaminate that sound with dirty electricity, with the components that you're using. What microphone do you have? What cable do you have? What amplifier you have? It is literally impossible to get a perfectly clean sound through a sound system. There's no such thing, even the best one in the world. For that, we start coming up with all sorts of ways to fix the contaminations. That's where mixers come in. Mixers are basically ways to fix and improve what we got when we went through the system. So a mixer will typically be sitting there just before the amplifier. And I'll show you all sorts of things we can do with the mixer in order to get better sound. Just a couple of things, general knowledge. An amplifier could be on its own, or it could be part of the mixer. There are mixers that do their own amplification. It could also be part of the speaker. That would be called an active speaker, where the amplifier is inside the speaker. but the flow is the same. We have a singer, we translate it to electricity, we fix it up, we amplify it, we send it to the speaker, and then people on the other side can hear it. Another interesting thing to know, which sometimes is relevant, is that this whole system is technically a little bit symmetrical. The speaker does exactly what the microphone does, just backwards, which means that if someone on this end were to scream really loud into the speaker and we flip the amplifier around and so on and so forth, then theoretically you could hear things out of the microphone. It's the same electrical components make a microphone that make a speaker. They're just different size and they're flipped back to front. But on rare occasions, you might actually hear something coming out of the microphone. It is possible. This system is, in some ways, it's very symmetrical. Okay, any questions at this point? Okay, so moving on. Feedback. And I'm jumping into feedback early on because feedback is actually a very basic thing that can happen, and it has a lot to do with where did I put my microphone, where did I put my speaker, so it has a lot to do with how I build the system. Feedback basically happens when what's coming out of the speaker loops around and goes back into the microphone. Okay, and once that happens, I don't know if you can see my cursor, my mouse cursor. Can people see it? Okay, great. So once that happens, it's gonna close a loop. It goes through the cable, out of the speaker, through the air, back into the microphone, through the cable, out of the speaker, into the mic, da, 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 da. It closes a loop. That is called a feedback loop. It feeds back into the microphone. That loop will get louder and louder because it's being amplified each time, and then we just start getting this feedback. There is a number of things that can cause feedback. So I'm going to run through a few options. But basically what happens in feedback is that once the microphone starts to pick up what the speaker is giving, then it's feeding back into the system. So here are things that can cause feedback. First of all, the volume is too high, which is kind of the clear first possibility. If I turn up the volume so high that all this sound comes out of the speaker and reaches all the way to wherever the microphone is, I'm gonna get feedback. So high volume causes feedback. Another thing that causes feedback is if the microphone, and this is actually very important to understand, if the microphone is facing the speaker, then I'm very likely to get feedback. Microphones, at least the ones that I'm going to be talking about today, they are directional. A microphone picks up from here. It does not pick up from the back. That means that if my microphone is facing me and not you, you can scream as loud as you want. The microphone's going to pick me up. If the microphone is facing the speaker, that's going to close my loop. The speaker is just going to feed back. If you can see my mouse, it's going to feed back straight into the mic and it's going to create feedback. So one of the things that we want to do is to point the microphones away from the speakers. That includes monitors. If the microphone is facing the speaker or if it's facing the monitor, we're much more likely to get feedback. You might be amazed how much I can raise the volume if the microphone is pointing away from the speaker. I have a lot of headroom. I can use a lot of volume, but once the microphone faces the speaker, I'm in a lot of trouble. So that's something to bear in mind. The next thing that can cause feedback is, of course, if the microphone is too close to the speaker, then it might not even matter if the microphone is facing the other way because it's just so close that it's going to feed back. Whatever comes out of the speaker is going to go right in. But again, you might be surprised if the microphone is facing away from the speaker, you can get pretty close without having any feedback. So direction is very important. The last thing, and one of my personal favorites because it's so counterintuitive and this happens so often, if you place your hand over the microphone, you are very likely to get feedback. If people use a microphone like this, some people like to hold it on the edge and talk into it this way, you are very likely to get feedback. It's very counterintuitive. We all think that it's basically like doing this, but it's not. It's more like doing this. And so you are basically helping the microphone to hear better if you put your hand over it. As strange as that may sound, you're more likely to get feedback. And I've often had to tell people, even experienced musicians, please take your hand off the microphone because you're going to get feedback. Okay, so feedback questions? We're okay? Okay, so what that means is that where I put the speaker when I'm setting up my system is going to make a big difference. Where I put the microphones is going to make a big difference. If the musician likes to dance around and gets too close, it's going to make a big difference. Things like that. Okay, so that's why I kind of threw it in very early on. Where you put things makes a big difference. Okay, microphone types. We're not going to get into this very deep, but very generally speaking, there are dynamic microphones, which you've probably seen if you've seen live music. We usually see dynamic microphones on a stage. And then there are condenser microphones. We might see them on the stage. We're more likely to see them in a studio. The reason is that there's no feedback in a studio because there's no speakers. Everything that you're doing in a studio just gets recorded. No one needs to hear it through a speaker, so we're not worried about feedback. So we can use condenser microphones. Condenser microphones are basically much, much more sensitive. That makes them sound really great. On the stage, especially if you're not a professional sound engineer, I'm just going to keep it simple and say avoid condenser microphones if you ask me. Just don't deal with them. Not unless you have a professional who has a reason to use a condenser, and most of them will not, because they know how much they're risking feedback. So I highly recommend avoiding condensers. Just use dynamics, good old dynamics, the ones that we're familiar with. You will have a lot less feedback. Condensers are a lot less directional. They tend to pick up from everywhere. Again, I'm generalizing, but they're just too sensitive for live music. So that's all I'm going to say about microphones. Again, if there are any questions, please stop me. Instruments. Instruments, you can amplify most instruments with a microphone, including a keyboard. You can see that our keyboard here has a speaker. If I just put my microphone right up against that speaker, I will hear the keyboard. So if you don't know what to do with an instrument, just put a microphone on it. It's true that it won't sound as good. Again, I'm generalizing, but it won't sound as good for all sorts of reasons. You're going to have more noise. But if you need a fallback plan, and if you don't know what to do with an instrument, just put a microphone on it. Some instruments cannot work with a microphone, like keyboards that don't have a speaker. You have to plug them in. Electric guitars, things like that, you have no choice. You have to plug them in. But for the most part, a good fallback plan is to just use a mic. How do you plug an instrument in? Which is, yes, it's better to do that if you can. You can plug it straight into the mixer. A lot of people want to know, can I plug it straight into the mixer? Yes, in most cases you can. And you know, if the cable is long enough and all that kind of thing, you can plug it right into the mixer. I'll show you where it goes. Oh, I guess I could show you, since we're talking a little bit about connections. Microphones will often come with this kind of thing. It's called an XLR, and mixers, if I can bring it closer up, mixers will have a little XLR input and the microphone will go in there. It'll often also say mic on the top. Instruments, they'll usually come with a 1/4 inch, and a 1/4 inch is going to go more into the little 1/4 inch plug, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. 1/4 inch plug is going to look like this, as opposed to an XLR. An XLR, I don't have a male. Oh, I do have a male. XLRs have what you call a male and female, but these are both XLRs. They've both got 3 little pins inside, and that's for microphones. Instruments are going to be more 1/4 inch, so-called because they're a 1/4 inch wide, and they're going to go usually right next to the microphone. There's a little hole that'll say line on it. You can plug instruments into the line. They won't sound as good, but you can do that. You might have more noise. You might be lucky and not have any noise, but you can certainly try. If your cable is long enough and you have no choice, plug it in and hopefully it'll work. The best way to plug in instruments in most cases is using a DI, and I'm back on the PowerPoint presentation now. A DI box in a nutshell lowers the risk of noise. I'm not going to get into more detail than that, but we basically plug the instrument into the DI. It's a direct injection box, but we all call it a DI box. And from the DI, we go straight into our mixer. It's going to lower the chance of noise. That's all you need to know. Most musicians who need DIs know that they need DIs. Most of them know how to plug a DI in. You can always ask. But in a nutshell, that's how we're going to plug in. That's how we're going to prefer to plug in most instruments. Again, I'm really generalizing here, but it will usually sound better because once you use a microphone, you're going to have more noise. It's going to be harder to pick up the instrument without getting noise. If anyone has questions, please let me know. I'm going to stop for a moment if anybody wants to ask.
Are you going to cover pickups for instruments?
Okay, so thanks for asking. I certainly, I should have used that word. Instrument pickups are not all the same. Some of them go straight into the mic. Some of them need a DI. Most musicians will know if they need a DI or not. So if you have a musician bringing an instrument, then a common question is, do you have a pickup? If anyone doesn't know what a pickup is basically a tiny little microphone. Again, I'm generalizing, but it's basically a tiny little microphone of some kind that is inside the instrument. So if I take a guitar, my guitar doesn't have a pickup, but a lot of guitars will have a little plug right here. They have a microphone inside the guitar. I'll just plug right in, and then I can go through a DI into the mixer. Some go through a DI, some go through a mic, through right into the mic. Most of them can also go straight into the mixer without a DI. Again, everything I said applies. Your best shot is usually through a DI. Again, generalizing, but your best shot is usually through a DI, but the musicians will know what they need in most cases. It's good to ask in advance because if they need a DI, a lot of them won't have one. And again, if they don't have one, try going right into the mixer. You might have a bit of noise, you might not. Other questions? Okay, so.
I do have a question.
Yes, please.
So you talked a little bit about condenser mics.
Yes.
Can you add a little bit about phantom power, because the person running the sound is going to get asked about that.
Right. Okay. Phantom power is basically because my microphone is connected to the mixer through a cable. Condenser microphones need electric power in order to work. They need to be switched on in a sense. They're switched on basically by sending electricity through the same cable of the microphone, and that's called phantom power. Some DIs also need phantom power. Others work on a battery. Others still don't need anything. There's different types of DIs. Which DI you're using is not critical. You can use any DI on any, again, generalizing, but any DI should work on any instrument. You will have higher quality if you use the correct one for the correct instrument and all that kind of thing. You can talk to the musician and see, but for the most part, any DI will work. Phantom power powers DIs sometimes if they're necessary. It powers condensers if it's necessary. I can't think right now off the top of my head of any other case where you would need phantom power. It's not going to create huge problems if it's accidentally on, but I certainly prefer to have it off. I don't like to have extra electricity running through my cables. So if I don't need it, I prefer to keep it off. And again, because I would recommend not using condensers, you should only need it for DIs if they are what's called active DIs that require phantom power. I hope that answers the question well enough to, for the basics.
Yeah, the 2 points I wanted you to make was, A, if you're running a soundboard, the ability to turn on and off the phantom power is on the soundboard somewhere.
I cannot promise you that every soundboard will have that option.
Right, but if it's available, that's where it's going to be.
Right, it's going to be, yes, it's going to be on the soundboard. This one, I can turn it on. There's a little switch. Ooh, there's a little switch right here. If I switch it on, you might see a little red light go. I don't know if it's a little too far away. But this little red light switches on. Don't be surprised if when I turn it off, it switches off like a dimmer. It might take a full minute until it's completely off. Other mixers will have phantom power on every single channel. That allows you to use phantom power here without using it here. But yes, phantom power will typically be on the mixing board. We are generally going to go button by button, at least on a simple mixer. So hopefully I won't forget anything. But please, if I do, let me know. Questions are very helpful. Was there another point you had?
Well, just some old school condenser mics could be damaged, or some old school mics, I don't remember which type, could be damaged by phantom power. And I
Very
think
true.
that's by and large not a problem anymore. And I would hope that any musician that had such a mic would tell you, don't turn on my phantom power, you'll destroy my mic.
Yeah, everything you said is true. Hopefully anyone who is, trying to keep things simple and not dealing with professional sound engineering or big, productions or anything like that, complicated stuff, stay off the condensers. Yeah, I don't know of any microphone these days that gets damaged by phantom power, but it's true some of the old ones did. Everything you said, great.
Yeah.
Is it true that ribbon mics would get damaged by phantom power?
Ribbon mics?
Yes.
I
think
admit,
so.
I mean, I technically know what a ribbon mic is, but after having studied one and seen them in studios, I haven't worked with ribbon mics, so I just don't remember. I don't remember. I can guess, but that would be silly of me. You could look it up.
I think that's
The
true.
chances that
there's some
ribbon mics
high-level
are extremely rare. What is that?
There's some high-level mics that are still ribbon mics.
Right, high-end mics, but again, the chances that you will see a high-end mic on a simple, relatively average live show, that's quite unlikely. I have literally never seen a ribbon mic on stage, and I've been on a lot of stages, including large stages. I've never seen a ribbon mic on stage. I've only seen them in studios. So, I wouldn't lose sleep over that, but it may be. I don't know the answer about ribbon mics.
Asaf, so dynamic mics don't need the phantom power,
No,
but how do they get their power?
they don't need power. A dynamic microphone works on a magnet, not, this technically the same as you would stick on your refrigerator. And you don't need any more electricity than that to power a dynamic microphone.
Cool, very cool.
Okay, moving on. Okay, frequencies. We're getting into a little bit about how does music work in order to understand how to amplify it. I'm gonna have a little sip of tea. So let's do this with a tuner, if we can. Basically, music is sound waves. Low notes are gonna be large sound waves, whereas high notes are gonna be small sound waves. You can kind of see it on the computer screen. We've got big sound waves and small sound waves. The smaller they are, the higher the pitch. So Mickey Mouse uses small sound waves. I've got a tuner here, which is actually going to show us, hopefully, if we can see it. And I know that it's not very clear. I know that it's not the greatest image, but I hope that you can see that this is going to show me notes like. You don't need to be a musician, but the letters are notes, C, D, E. Down at the bottom, it's going to show me how many sound waves per minute, because low notes, it's really, when I'm talking about frequency, I'm talking about how many waves per minute is this note. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to grab a guitar, and I hope this will be clearer once I show you on a guitar. I'm going to grab a guitar and I'm going to play a note. When I play that note, if I were to show you that string in slow motion, you would see it vibrating. It would just be going dun, 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 in slow motion. It is vibrating 440. If you can see it down here, I hope it's visible. It's vibrating 440 times per minute. Okay, so that's my 440. I'm quite sure that's my 440A. If I play that same A an octave lower, I should be getting 220. My guitar's out of tune. It looks like it's sharp, but I'm right around 220. If I go down another octave, it's half, 110. Okay, coming back up, 220. Coming back up, 440. I'm going to do the same thing on my flute. I'm going to start at 440. Okay, so that's my 440 vibrations per minute. If I go up an octave, now I'm up at 880. 880 vibrations per minute. If I go up another octave, a very high note, it should be 1760. Sorry about that, but I don't know if you saw the tuner, but that was 1760 vibrations per minute. Okay, I'm gonna put this aside. The reason why I'm showing you all this is because musicians use this. Musicians say, play me an A. Computers don't say play me an A. Computers use numbers. Computers use frequencies. Mixers use frequencies. A mixer has no idea what an A flat is, but it does know what 415 is. And so when we're using mixers, we're using numbers. That's the first thing to bear in mind, is frequencies. We're using numbers on this thing. The next thing is overtones. And I'm going to share screen again. Oh, I fucked this up the way I should have. But anyway, you can kind of see everything at the same time. If you look up at the top of my screen, you see a little prism. Hopefully everyone can see the prism. It's right next to the word overtones. It's right where my mouse is. There's a little picture of a prism, but everyone knows prisms. White light goes in through one side. A rainbow comes out of the other side with all of the colors in it. So everybody knows prisms, right? A note, a musical note, even though I'm playing an A, and you can see it here in the notes, if I play this really low A down here, even if no one is a musician, I'm telling you that this note is an A. It's not just white, it's actually a whole rainbow. There's a whole bunch of notes inside that A that our ear will only really pick up if we really know what to look for. But if we're just used to hearing an A, then all we will hear is an A. So I'm playing you this, but inside that A is another A, and an E, and another A, and an E, and an A, and then C, and then whatever. There's a whole bunch of notes like a spectrum. It's all hidden inside that one note, just like a bunch of colors are hidden in white light. I hope that in itself is clear enough. You can see these numbers at the bottom of the graph on the screen, and it says harmonics. They are referred to by many different names: overtones, harmonics, partials. All of these words refer to a whole bunch of different notes, like a whole bunch of different colors, that all come together to make that one note that my ear picks up. If I play the pink note on the left side of the screen, that's number 1. There is also note number 2, note number 3, note number 4, note number 5, note number 6. Every note, like a prism, can be split into a bunch of different notes. Is that, that might be obscure for some people, but is that clear enough? Okay, I'm going to show you why that's important. I'm going to move down and show you that. Let's look at an oboe. If I play the first note on, if I play the first note on an oboe, then I have a whole bunch of different notes. Notice that they're not all the same volume. If we go down under the oboe, the flute is maybe the most, like, picturestic overtone spectrum, because every overtone is just a little quieter than the last one, so it creates this really clean, very pretty. A clarinet is maybe the ugly duckling of overtones because it actually skips every other one. So some overtones are loud, some overtones are soft. On an oboe, you can see the pattern. On a trumpet, you can see the pattern. Every instrument creates a different pattern of these notes. So I'm playing an A. Your ear hears the A, but in truth, you're hearing a whole bunch of different notes. Each one of them is at a different volume. The volumes of the notes determine the texture of the sound. And so an oboe has this texture. This is what the spectrum looks like on an oboe. This is what the spectrum looks like on a clarinet. This is what the spectrum looks like on a flute, and so on. Okay? Is that clear enough? And maybe to help explain that a little further, I'm gonna pull up, let's see, I'm gonna try to make this huge. Let's try to make this much bigger. Okay, if I'm looking at a flute, theoretically speaking, I could turn a flute into an oboe if I just, well, let's see, I want to turn, well, you know what, let's turn an oboe into a flute. All I have to do is make each one of them a little quieter. So I'm going to take a little paintbrush. I'm going to make this one longer because it has to be the longest one. This is going to be the second place. And then I'm going to take, I'm going to erase this one, and you can see that I'm slowly drawing a flute overtone spectrum by just changing the overtones of my oboe. Okay, and it's looking more and more like a flute, at least visually. Is that clear? Now, theoretically, if I could do this with sound engineering, I could cause an oboe to look like a flute, to sound like a flute, and no one would be able to tell the difference, theoretically, by changing the overtones. In practice, it's impossible. There's no system that is so perfect and so clean that it can really turn an oboe into a flute. That's just never going to happen. But here's why it is important. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint, and let's look at a violin. Look at the overtone spectrum of that violin, and you can see our same 440 A that we played. It's got all those other notes. It's got that 880. It's inside. It's got that 1760. It's all inside. It's got all those frequencies in it. Every time I play a note on a violin, I'm playing all those frequencies at the same time. And we'll soon see why that matters, because I can make a violin sound different by changing the graph of the overtones, because I can amplify one frequency, bring down another frequency, and suddenly my violin sounds more like an oboe, or more like a clarinet, or more like a flute, or whatever it is. Or I can make the violin sound, whatever. I think the point is more or less clear, hopefully. Basically, a frequency is how high is the note, and an overtone is that spectrum where one note is actually composed of many different notes. Any questions about those basic terms? Okay, one of the things to bear in mind is the spectrum starts at whatever note I'm playing. If I'm playing an A, then my spectrum is above that A. If I play an A on a violin and I want to change the sound of that A, I need to mess with the violin's notes above the A. Nothing below the A exists. It's A and up. The spectrum starts from my note and goes up. That means, for example, if I'm amplifying a violin and there's a lot of low noise in the room, I can bring down all those low frequencies and the violin will still sound like a violin because it's playing from the note and up. I'll erase everything below the violin and I'll have less noise, but I'll still hear the violin. Okay, is that clear? Overtones go up, they don't go down. They're only above my notes. So if I'm amplifying a woman and her voice is a high voice and I want to erase everything below her voice, I can do that and she'll still sound exactly the same because all of her overtones are above and not below. Okay? We can come back to that if it becomes unclear, but we're going to run with that. So I'm going to start looking at mixers. And a mixer is basically a whole bunch of channels repeated. So everything that I see in this red frame, channel number 2 is the same, channel number 3 is the same, channel number 4 is the same, channel number 5 is the same. So if I show you all the buttons on channel number 1, you're going to know what to do with channel number 2. They're all the same. So a mixer does look like it's got a whole bunch of buttons, but they're all exactly the same. They're just repeated. We might start with, I wonder if we'll start, okay, let's start with this mixer. It's a real basic mixer. And I've connected a microphone to it. And I wonder if maybe I'll stop sharing. I am not clear in my head on what's going to be easier to start with, the little one or the big one, but I'm going to start with the little one. Okay, I'm going to turn on my speaker. You should be able to hear me louder now than you did before. Okay, because I am now coming out of a speaker. It's right out of the screen, but it's right out there. I've also created a monitor down here because if you've seen stages, you know that we have speakers and the musicians have monitors on the stage, which is speakers that are pointing at the musicians that help the musicians hear themselves, especially in a noisy room. The reason we don't have feedback is, of course, because the microphone isn't pointing at the monitors. The microphone is pointing away from them. So the musicians have a monitor right in front of them. They hear themselves, but there's no feedback. Okay? I'm going to create some feedback on purpose. I want to show you what happens if I point the microphone right at my monitor. I'm going to turn off the speaker. And you can still hear me like this. But I'm going to start turning on my monitor. You can hear that it sounds very different. Brings us back to that hopeless situation where every electric system is always going to contaminate my sound. So you can guess that this monitor is far lower quality than my speaker. My speaker sounds, my speaker sounds a lot more natural. So you can see how much dirt an electric system can create just because of the quality. I'm comparing a studio speaker to a street monitor, just something that I would use busking. So it's very nasal. You know, you can really hear what the system does to it, and that's why we need all this. So I'm connecting to my monitor. I'm going to try to create feedback. If I turn this way up, I might get feedback. You hear it? Okay, we're already starting to hear it because it's so loud that it's feeding back into my microphone. It's creating a loop, and I'm feeding back. If I put the microphone close to the speaker, it's very fast. Okay, again, you'd be surprised how it's very loud in here. No one's in the room with me, but this is very loud, and I'm pointing away from the monitor, so I'm safe. I can turn it up pretty high. As soon as I do this, I start getting feedback. Okay, people who talk with their microphone down here, they force the sound engineer to turn the microphone up, and that creates feedback. That's why we want to talk with a microphone here. Microphones are very directional. They need to be here. So that's why sound engineers get very touchy about, like, hold it up to your mouth. If anybody's wondering, the ideal distance is right about fist distance, but you know, I sing a lot. I love holding the microphone close because it creates an intimacy. People are going to do this a lot. So in any case, the important thing is that it's close to you. Okay, so let's start messing with connections first. Microphone goes into the microphone. It's called a microphone jack or a microphone socket. Goes in here. Right under that, I have the line socket. That's where I would connect instruments and any number of other things. A DI, which I forgot to say, a DI actually goes into the microphone. Okay, a DI kind of turns an instrument into a little bit of a microphone. It goes up here, it doesn't go down here. If you need to connect the instrument directly to the mixer, skip the DI, go straight to the line, and hope that you don't have any noise. Okay, gain. One of the initially confusing things about a mixer is that it's got more than one volume knob. It's got one way at the top. It's got one way at the bottom. I can turn my volume up. Oh, you know what? Let's work with. I'm gonna work with my main speaker. I think that's gonna be easier to understand. I've got volume way up here, and I've got volume way down here. There is a reason for that. I assume you can see these little meters up here. Generally speaking, a mixer is organized in the order in which I am affecting the sound. And so the microphone, we can really look at it visually and assume that the sound is coming from here, and the first thing it hits is the gain. The gain decides how loud I am. This is louder, 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 quieter, 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 until now you're hearing me just naturally. It's not coming from the speaker anymore. Now it's going to be much louder, 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 until I might even feedback eventually. So the gain creates what I call a healthy, oh, it's not me, what we call a healthy signal. It brings enough of my singer or musician into the mixer so that we can do proper EQ, proper whatever we need to do with it. First, we need to make sure we have a healthy signal. If the gain is very low, then I can try to turn up my volume, but I'm not going to get much. And the EQ is also not going to it's not going to work in ideal settings. If I want to work with ideal settings, what I need is a healthy signal. A healthy signal, conveniently, is easy to check visually. You don't have to listen, you can look. If you want a healthy signal, I'm going to turn down the volume because at this point it's very loud. If you want a healthy signal, you want your meter to be pretty much at the top of the green. Some mixers will also have a yellow zone. Yellow is okay, so maybe somewhere in the yellow or the beginning of the yellow, but you don't want it to hit red. If it hits red, then you're basically overloading the mixer and you'll start to get noises, all sorts of noises. So a healthy signal is as loud as possible without hitting red. Now, of course, here's the challenge. No one is a robot, and nobody always keeps the same volume when they talk or when they sing or when they play. That means that I need to leave a little extra room at the top in case the singer gets excited and starts to scream. I don't want it to go red, so I'm gonna keep it somewhere toward the top, but not too high. With experience, you kind of get the hang of it. You find that sweet spot, and yeah, I mean, we fix all the time. I might fix the gain in the middle of a show if I have to. If the singer suddenly gets on stage and starts to scream, I'm going to bring the gain down. Otherwise, I'm going to start getting a lot of noise. Okay, so we connected our microphone. We're looking for a healthy signal. We're going to, I don't know, look for maybe 75%, something like that. We want it toward the top of the green, but not in the red. This gives us plenty of playroom with our volume. I can turn it all the way down or I can turn it very high because I have a healthy signal. So I have a lot to work with. So, like I said, it just goes in order. This is one of the first things that happens to my signal when it comes into the mixer. There are other options. We'll get to them. I think that it won't hurt to go through this whole thing twice, so I'll go through it once on a simple mixer, and then I'll go through it once on a more complicated mixer. EQ. The reason I got into all those frequencies and overtones is because EQ basically takes advantage of those things. EQ plays with the overtone spectrum. I can bring up the high frequencies and then I get a bunch of S's. All the high frequencies are suddenly louder. I'm even getting feedback in my high frequencies. You're starting to hear high notes. Okay, it starts to actually create. Oh yeah, thanks. EQ stands for equalization. Ooh, so I'm getting high note feedback because I'm raising the overtones, the high overtones, so much that they're very loud. But my voice is more or less the same. What I raised was only the part of the spectrum that creates S's, which is the high frequencies. My S's are now very loud. If I turn it down, people who start to gradually lose their hearing, they will often lose their S's. Their S's are not as loud as anymore. They're losing their high frequencies. So here's something that EQ does. It changes the spectrum. Below the high frequencies, I have the mid frequencies. You might hear a lot of different terms, high mid, low mid. It really just depends on how much you're zooming in. The simplest is everything together, which is basically volume. I'm just raising and lowering volume. If I want to raise just the high frequencies, then it's high frequencies. Middle frequencies are going to make me sound very nasal, and low frequencies are going to make me sound very bassy. Each one of them has its own texture. I am causing my voice to sound a little different, maybe a little more like a bass guitar, maybe a little more like an oboe, and maybe a little more like, I don't know, an S. But I'm changing the spectrum. I'm just messing with my low frequencies, messing with my middle frequencies, messing with my high frequencies. I can zero in and say, well, I've got low mid, I've got high mid, I've got high, da, 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 da. It's all the same. It's basically just different ranges of those overtones that I'm messing with. Why does that help? Because if I'm in a dirty system that makes me sound nasal, and this is a very simple EQ, low, mid, high. Some EQs are very complicated. They've got a lot of buttons and you can mess with them. Assuming we have time, I'll show you that. But for now, we're going to use a very simple EQ. Most simple mixers, they'll just have this low, mid, high. So I'm going to go back to my dirty system, the one with the monitor down here, because that one made me sound nasal, and we'll see if I can fix my nasal voice, even though it's a very simple EQ. Feeding back, sorry. Oh, because I raised the gain. That means that everything is much louder now. Okay, here's my nasal speaker. Right now I'm not using EQ at all. It's so dirty that I sound very nasal. If I want to sound less nasal, I might lower the middle frequencies, and if I lower them enough, then I'm not as nasal anymore. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm going to bring it back. I'm nasal again. Now I'm not as nasal, okay? The whole idea behind EQ is to fix the contamination of the system, to give me as clean and pure a sound as I can using EQ. If I'm going to go back to the other speaker, going back to the regular speaker, if people cannot hear the let's say that someone is speaking in a room and everybody says we can't understand what they're can't understand, try raising the high frequencies, because that's going to make all the s's and the k's and the t's and everything's going to, all the consonants are going to be a lot more clear. You're going to be able to understand words more easily because high frequencies accentuate the consonants. So that comes in handy. We'll get to more EQ tricks. EQ is, aside from volume and on and off switches, EQ really is at the center of good sound. You could spend your whole life, getting better at how to do EQ. So I'm going to give you a few tricks, but here's the most important thing. Start with nothing. Start with nothing, start with nothing, start with nothing. Don't touch the EQ. As a matter of fact, make sure it's in the middle, because you sometimes walk into a mixer one morning and somebody did this and you didn't notice, and everybody's really nasal because the low frequencies are gone. Make sure it's in the middle, and then just don't touch it. Don't touch it. Not unless something is wrong and you want to try to experiment and fix it, but for the most part, systems are designed to be as clean as possible without EQ. Systems have their own contamination fixers inside, so you're better off not using EQ at all. But through experimentation, you may learn how to use it and how to improve things, because there are EQ tricks that can help. Okay. Monitor sends. In a nutshell, and we'll get to this more, but right now, just for the basics, monitor sends basically allow me to send whatever I'm, the singer, I can send it to the speakers, what everyone hears, or I can send it to the monitor that's on the stage. In order to send to the monitor, I have right in the middle, it'll say auxiliary send. If I turn the volume on that up, then the singer on the stage, her monitor is suddenly going to, she's going to hear herself. Okay, I'll have a picture of that and make it clear, but generally this is going to send, this down here is going to send to the audience. That's my main speaker. These guys called auxiliary sends are going to send to my monitors. It's like a separate volume for auxiliary sends. Sometimes these two are connected. For the most part, they are not. Our standard way of working is that they're not connected, which means that I can give the singer as much volume as she wants without people in the hall hearing a difference. That's my ideal situation. I don't usually want these connected. So most simple mixers don't have the option of connecting them, and that's great. Panning, which we're not going to hear the difference today, but panning, if I have a speaker on this side of the room and a speaker on that side of the room, and I pan to the right, then I'm going to hear it from that side, and I won't hear it from that side. If I pan to the left, I'm going to hear it from that side and not from that side. Now, the reason you don't hear me at all is because I'm only using one speaker. So if I pan this way, this speaker is on. If I pan the other way, it's going to turn off because I don't have one on the other side. So now you don't hear me at all. It's off. Anyway, panning is which speaker am I sending this singer to? Am I going to hear the singer from the right or from the left or from the middle? If you are trying to keep things simple, keep off the panning knob. You're not going to need it in 99% of the cases. If you're doing folk dancing in a large hall, yes, panning can come in handy, but it can also complicate. So if you're trying to keep things simple, keep everything in the middle, and that's it. I can say briefly that what I will do with panning is when you use panning, you basically create the impression that the singer is standing here, the bassist is standing here, the harp player is standing here, and the clarinet player is standing here, and the drummer is standing there. This helps people hear more clearly, because if they were all standing in the same place, then you get a mess. Whereas if they're standing in a line, and each one of them is coming from a different direction, then you hear more clearly. It creates a beautiful clarity, and it also creates this image that you are surrounded by musicians. That's what panning is good for. I'll send the singer just 45 degrees to the, well, the singer I'll usually keep in the middle, but I might send the harpist 45 degrees to the right by just turning the panning knob 45 degrees to the right, and then my harpist is here. I might put the clarinet player 45 degrees to the left, and then the clarinet player is here. And that way I create this image that people hear, and they're not hearing everything from the same place. I'm creating a panoramic, that's where it comes from, a panoramic image. That's what panning is for. Okay. I know that we can all get very excited and run to a mixer and try all these things, but I'm really saying if you're trying to keep it simple, all you really need is gain and volume. I'm dead serious. Do the experiments at home. You know, try not to do them on stage. If it's your first time on a mixer, do them at home. Get a friend to give you one of these, put up a speaker just like I'm doing, and then start doing this and say, oh, let's see what happens when I do this. Let's see what happens when I do this. You know, experiment. If you're trying to keep things simple, this is all you need, just volume. Okay. So I think we're done with the small mixer. We might jump into a bigger one, but let's see if anyone has questions.
Yeah, I wanted to mention one thing. If you play with panning, you have to be careful where you're located in a room. If you are, as often happens, the mixer is next to the stage, then it's better not to play with panning at all.
Okay, so if the mixer is next to the stage, that means that I, as a sound engineer, I'm not where the audience is. I'm close to the stage. I'm right next to the speaker. That means that I cannot hear what the audience hears. So if my screen is the hall, oh, you know what? Okay, I've got a nice little, and going back here. Okay, here's a little concert hall. I've got a band at the top with my singer, my harpist, clarinet, percussion, bass. I've got a speaker. Oh, both of my speakers say L on them. Sorry, my mistake. It should be left and right. Both of them, I've got two left speakers. But you can see what a hall looks like. The mixer here, a lot of sound engineers will prefer to sit right in the middle of the hall, right in the middle of the audience, pretty much in the most expensive seat. That's where the sound engineer likes to sit, because then they can hear what the audience hears. I didn't catch who said that you're next to the speaker, but thank you for saying that. If the mixer is right next to the speaker, then as a sound engineer, I have no idea what the audience is hearing. I'm hearing right out of the speaker's right here, and I don't know what things sound like. That means that a lot of the things I do aren't going to sound right. If you ever watch me as a sound engineer in a situation where the mixer is next to the speaker, you will see me constantly running out to wherever the audience is, listening, running back, changing things, running out, checking how it sounds, running back, fixing again, and I'm just constantly back and forth. Because yes, not just panning, but even volume is going to sound very different if you're sitting right next to the speaker. So that's definitely a good thing to keep in mind. If you have the possibility of putting your mixer where the audience is, then you are changing things as you are hearing what the audience hears. That's a much healthier way to work. We might touch on that when we get to digital mixers.
For most of us that are in folk dance bands, we unfortunately don't have the luxury of having a sound man out there. We are the sound people, and we're playing music and trying to run the board at the same time.
Right. Which is one of the reasons why you'll see people ask someone to stand in the hall and tell them how it sounds. They might also send one of the musicians down to the dance floor and tell us how it sounds. Can you hear the singer? Can you hear the bass?
That's what we do. I'm the singer in my band. I do percussion too, but I try to make either the first or the second thing that we play something that I don't play on, and then I go out in the hall for the first part, and then later on when there's another one I don't play on, I always go out and check all the time because we want to sound good.
That's the way to go.